And we welcome now to the program the famous garden mama, Nellie Neal, host of Weekend Gardening on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Garden mama, good to see you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me in, Gerard. Nice to see you.
Absolutely. So it's a bit cold outside. It's hard to believe we would even discuss the practice of gardening, but what do we do this time of year?
Well, when I began my radio career, it was December, and they said, if she can get a couple of calls, we might have something here, and that's 20, however many years ago.
Well, congratulations.
Because there is actually, in the Deep South, we're very fortunate because we get to garden all year round. And so this month, we're cutting back ornamental grasses. We're spraying camellias with oil to keep the bugs away.
Right.
And at this particular point in time, sort of walking around to see what sprouted and what didn't in all this cold weather.
Yeah.
So they'll keep up with stuff,
Well, I think that I'm not alone in this regard, that I lost a lot of the plants around my foundation plantings around my house to the cold last year, and then of course the drought kind of exacerbated that. But a lot of them had checked out before we ever got to the drought.
Between the wet and the heat and the drought, we've seen the stressors that plants do not accept in many cases.
Yeah.
The good news is all of our shrub growers across the southeast are busy.
Yeah,
and there's
that's
going to
true.
be plenty of stock to get in there and get started again with.
Okay.
But there are going to be some things we're just going to lose. There are other things. Frankly, here's what happens a lot of the time. I think people cut it back, and it starts to come back, but it's in your front yard.
Yeah.
It doesn't look so great.
Yeah.
Dig that thing up, put it in the back, put on a new one. Come on. I mean, it's like getting a haircut. If it doesn't look good, get another one.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. There are plants. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
That's the best part.
One of the varieties that I lost that I was a little surprised of, that I have a fair amount of around my property, I don't remember the more formal name, but I guess commonly known as cinnamon girls.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they all checked out, or not all, but several of them did.
They probably were hit very hard, even the ones that were in good shape.
Yeah, and that was from the cold.
Yeah, the cold will do that particularly because they were stressed from the drought last year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so one
thing has led to the other for a bunch of those shrubs like that. The stichiums they're lovely. The cinnamon girls, and there are a couple of others that have very attractive names like that in that group, and they're all fun and they grow well. But they got hit.
And the younger sasanquas, the shishis, I had some that weren't terribly mature, and some of them didn't really make it either.
It may set them back. They sometimes have to start again, and sometimes they just have to be replaced. I didn't lose. I thought I had lost my quince. I have an older flowering quince. And I thought that I had lost it because in the drought last summer, it lost all its leaves and never showed another. But I noticed yesterday it's trying to put on leaves, and I thought, this is a strange time to be struggling, but okay, go ahead.
That's kind of weird. So is there anything you can do? I also had a couple of ornamental trees. Is there, I was always told that you sort of maybe break the limbs and look inside. If they look kind of green and white, they're okay. But if they're really brittle and they're all sort of brown, that they may have...
Well, I'm into the thumbnail test.
Okay.
My grandfather would have done it with the extremely thin, very well honed knife that he had that was his pocket knife. I don't carry a pocket knife, so I use my thumbnail.
Okay.
But just scratch the bark a little bit. If it's green under the bark, there is life.
Okay.
And then it becomes a decision as whether you want to wait for it or not.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't.
Even though it may have survived, it may take a while before it kind of returns to something that is attractive.
I have a friend who is he needs to replace Elaeagnus.
Yeah.
And he has... I have Elaeagnus that was a traveling hedge in a movie that I worked on. So they're in the back of my property, and I ignore them, which means that they're perfect propagating material. You can go cut them off anytime. They don't care.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of project that I think people are going to be taking up.
Okay.
Is just to see how's it doing, can I make more of it, and do I need to replace this, or can I get something new? Because there's always another choice to be made.
Well, something else popular, of course, around this area are azaleas. Of course, there are a number of varieties of those. Seems like some of them fared better than others through the weather.
I think so. In some cases, the older, more established, the big old things, the formosas with the big purple flowers and stuff, those seem to have done pretty well.
Yeah.
Because they've probably been there for 40 years and they've seen worse than this, at one time or another. But there are some plantings where you can just tell that the burn is there, and they're going to end up. They don't need to be pruned really, but they do need to be encouraged with mulch and water and that sort of thing as spring comes on.
Okay.
They may make it, and they may have to just be cut back by about half in some cases.
Okay. All right. So
I really do like Encore azaleas. They're the ones that bloom several times during the year.
Yep.
And I have seen several varieties of that have done very, very well. But those were bred for conditions all the way up through North Carolina and Virginia. So they have a little more tolerance. They have a little more tolerance than some of the others.
Something that I like that's not terribly popular around this area, it's more so to our south, are pittosporums.
Oh, I love pittosporums.
I like pittosporums because they're kind of almost a ground cover. They don't get really big. They're really neat. It's kind of a front sort of plant when you got something behind them.
We have so many choices. The Wheeler's Dwarf is a beautiful one. I like pittosporum because it has a flattened leaf. It looks a little spade-shaped, so it's different.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when it blooms, it gets. We know why it's called mock orange because it has a citrusy kind of flavor to it. But the variegated ones are so dramatic in a container, particularly the small ones, because they just pop.
Yeah.
You know, they'll sit there on your patio and absolutely be happy for the entire year, and you can add to them. You can put bulbs in the pot, or you can put another container next to it with something else. But I agree with you. I think pittosporum is an underused plant, and I like it very much.
Little questionable this far north, though?
No.
You don't think? Okay.
If it's exposed like to the north side of your house in the country, it's probably not going to do as well as in my urban environment where it's up against a bunch of pine trees.
Okay, that makes total sense. Well, I love those, and they seem to be hardier and look less leggy than say hawthorn, which
That's true.
Similar kind of looking.
They present similarly, but the pittosporums respond to pruning better.
Okay.
In my experience.
Yeah. So what else should we be doing this time of year? You listed off a couple of things. I know the oil and the camellias and so forth.
And other shrubs, particularly that have had any problems in the last year or so, and most of them have. But what we're doing with the oil spray, it's just a highly refined horticultural oil, and all we're doing is suppressing whatever happens to be bothering. In other words, there's insect eggs, there's pest bodies, there's pieces of things, and if we can control those, then they don't present a problem later in the year that requires the use, say, of a systemic insecticide, which we try to avoid because of the pollinators.
Okay. Is this something that an average homeowner can do, or do you need professional help?
Well, an average homeowner can do it as long as you're comfortable doing it. But there are professional gardeners who do that. I'm happy to recommend folks for that. I don't think that there are as many gardeners as there should be, because I think there are more and more people like me who are at a certain age that we would really like to have somebody else come dig that hole, somebody else come over here and do this or that. Yeah. But the desire and the joy and, frankly, the therapeutic benefits of gardening are just so tremendous that nobody wants to leave that behind. Yeah. If you're growing entirely indoors now, walk in my house right now, it looks kind of like, the jungle has blown in, but that's because I keep a lot of things indoors, and then the ones that go outside have to come in during the winter. So
I got you.
It's kind of crazy in there right now. There's rooms you can't quite walk through. But on the other hand, you can start some seeds right now. If you only have a square foot of space, you can get ready for spring. So you can be doing any of those things. It's a joy to be into gardening because you can do it all year.
All right. Well, what about new plantings? Can you do it this time of year around here?
There are trees and shrubs. There's no better time than to plant when the weather is cold and the trees and shrubs are dormant. I wouldn't do it today because we're going to hit another really cold patch for a couple of days. But as we get nicer, wetter conditions, absolutely.
Okay.
I don't have any problem doing that.
Let them get established and push their roots and then start to go north of the ground.
Just like everything else, we'd like them to get on their feet before we ask them to stand up and put on flowers. So if we can get them planted in the wintertime, we have a better shot at having them be healthy and happy going through the rest of the year.
Okay. And then what's kind of your recommendation, Garden Mama, for doing, say, annual plantings around here? The various flowers and so forth, spring.
I love annual flowers, spring and fall. They're two of my very favorite things. Right now, I noticed this morning that the stock did not freeze. I have flowering stock and pansies and snapdragons and those kind of things. Yeah. And they're all doing real well.
Oh, they are?
I love all that.
Well,
you can plant all that again, but then we get into springtime and you can plant just about anything.
Okay.
Color everywhere.
Is there like some like cutoff where you need to kind of wait for and say, well, we're sort of out of the danger zone, that we're not at risk of some of these spring annuals freezing and stuff?
With a cover over it, you can keep it much colder than you think.
Okay.
Guess what? I brought your wife a T-shirt.
Oh, okay.
We'll get you one.
The Garden Mama T-shirt. I love it. That's awesome.
Thank you, Gerard. This
Appreciate
is fun.
you coming on.
See you again soon.
Thanks. We're coming right back, folks, in the Element Well studio.